I'm Catherine Kingsley.
And I'm Catherine Stern.
And this is
Contemplating Culture,
a missionary walk through a secular age. Together we journey through A Secular Age by Charles Taylor, a book looking at the history and philosophy of how the world got where it is, and the impacts of our contemporary culture for us today as missionaries.
And we're inviting you to join the conversation.
Hello and welcome to Contemplating Culture.
Hello everyone.
So welcome to today's episode, and with today we bring to a close the chapter on providential deism. So if you remember in our last episode we were talking about goodness. Today we're moving on to, values beyond goodness. So goodness is one value, but looking at some of the other goods, that society wouldn't necessarily see as good. And Taylor is trying to wrap up his whole big, long argument on this turning point of providential deism, where we shift from working for society from a Christian perspective to having an alternate reason for the project of society and how we go about that. So his key point here that he's trying to make is that everything that he's been talking about is still relevant today. He wants us to know that all of today's unbelief comes back to this hinge point, and he's got some interesting things to say. So I'll just read a couple of the points because I think I just find them really interesting. So he says, the interesting issue is whether there could be unbelief without any sense of some religious view which is being negated, a condition of absence of religion which would no longer deserve the name unbelief. If so, it would be different from our present world in one crucial respect. Unbelief for great numbers of contemporary unbelievers is understood as an achievement of rationality. It cannot have this without a continuing historical awareness.
So basically what he's talking about is that this whole chapter is a turning point from a place where belief was still normal and God sat behind all of these changes as the reason for. And suddenly we're about to emerge into a space where we don't have God, but this unbelief is not a space where there just never was God, but it's a conscious rejection of the need for God.
Yeah. And he's saying that is sitting in the consciousness. And so his point is going to be that this is what's still sitting in the background for all unbelief today, that there's unbelief is the word that we use because it's in relation to God as a reference point. And it's like we've conquered, we've been victorious over that project of religion now with the rationality that comes through the Enlightenment. He goes on to say, this is why the narrative history of the rise of unbelief, so this whole story that he's been telling, does not merely relate an irrelevant past, an optional extra for history buffs. Rather, all present issues around secularism and belief are affected.
It's so true, really, isn't it? How much have we learnt in going through this history and just reflecting on how much we can still see about the way that our lives and our cultures are today? That the way that we live belief even is affected by all this Enlightenment thinking, like that rationality that shapes how I think today. You can see its beginnings there, and you can see in it the beginnings of a lot of the ways that our culture operates still, even if there's other things being added onto the top. They're conscious responses to that way of thinking or being.
Yeah, and I find it really fascinating because for a lot of the people that I encounter in the world today that would sit in a shifting from belief or a pure unbelief position, it's kind of this individual project, and there could be a mistaken thought that I've got here by myself, and that's the Enlightenment mindset, right? That through my own reason, my own maker of meaning, I've got here. But Taylor is saying, well, no, you didn't just get here and you didn't just appear with this mind and arrive at this location. So many things in the last few hundred years have taken place to create a ground where that was even possible for you. And for you to really understand where you are, it's not an option to negate the history of how you got here. You didn't just, what's the word where you respawn, that kind of like, where you didn't just arrive on the scene on a blank slate. You've arrived into a point of history. And I think that that's one of the things I see in the modern mindset is this denial of tradition, this denial of history, of everything that's gone before. Like, I want to come from nothing and make myself. But that's just not true in the human condition.
And I think, I don't know, it's more than just my individual belief or unbelief. It's the culture, as we're going to go into, the values, the political society, our expectations of the world around us or how things will work that are actually shaping us without our really noticing. And that's the whole social imaginary thing, really, isn't it? That it sits there almost unstated, unseen, but it has a huge influence on how we expect to relate or how we expect the world to work.
That's it. And so there's 3 points that kind of lead to this position. So I kind of started with the ending, but the argument kind of begins with the first point Taylor has is that exclusive humanism, this sense of focus on humanity that came out of the Enlightenment. So there was like the Christian reason why we were doing things, and that would be the moral source. So the Christian moral source for the projects of freedom, of welfare, of reform, of all the things that we've been talking about. At this point, exclusive humanism becomes an alternate moral source in such a way that it can then break away from Christianity and still be a valid project.
And you can kind of track that happening, really, can't you, in the history that we've had where, like, God and the transcendent have become less and less important. Like we were talking before, and I was almost seeing an image of it like a toothless dragon, that once you pull all the transcendent teeth out of your image of God, well, what's left? We actually don't need you. Thank you very much. We can do this by ourselves. And that's the progression that deism has taken the thinkers of the world on.
And if you remember, one of Taylor's reasons for writing this whole work is to propose an alternate narrative to the subtraction theory, that once we get science and get reason and sort everything out, it's natural that there will be a decline of God, a decline of belief. But his second point here is that this particular turning point, the shift, the able to move onwards from it, had to happen in this way. It wasn't a natural progression. It needed all of these little pieces that we've been building up to kind of come about. And then he lands on his third point of, and because of that, this origin still matters.
So, in a sense, he's arguing that, like, we need to understand our history. We need to know where we're situated in the world.
So he gives an example here of, say, if you take freedom, and he says that freedom comes to be a value in its own right, separated from Christianity, in such a way that when Louis XIV revokes the Edict of Nantes, is that how you say it?
No, I think. But that's okay.
You're the native French speaker here. Do you just want to talk about what that was, and then we'll talk about the reaction?
It was a law allowing religious freedom in France to end the wars between Protestants and Catholics in France, basically. And so when he revoked the edict, he was revoking it back to Catholicism being the religion of choice in France and allowing discrimination against Protestants.
So there was a time when that wouldn't have had the reaction that it did, but because of all the things that had gone into place, when he revokes this edict, there's indignation.
And not just from Protestants.
And so there's this sense that freedom, and so Taylor says freedom, in particular freedom of belief, is beginning to become a value in itself, a crucial feature of any acceptable political order. And so freedom is one of these values that emerges. And another one he said is welfare, so prosperity, growth, all of that kind of thing, in such a way that they're going to become bigger than Christianity, so that even if a Christian thing is coming in, this value is higher. And what's really fascinating, I think, like when we're talking about this turning point, this hinge point, there's been a lot of ideas that have been floating around for possibly even 1,000 years up to this point, like developing, but they're always sitting in the elite. The thing that's really critical about this time is that these ideas of the elite start to become directives for the mass population. Freedom becomes a directive. Prosperity becomes a directive. Social welfare becomes a directive.
And what we mean by directives is essentially that it becomes law. It's not like Johnny be a good boy, but it's like we now have laws about tolerance, and if you're not tolerant, you risk a fine or a prison sentence or whatever. That these things, you know, they must be good, and if there's no God to enforce the good, you know, Johnny be a good boy because otherwise God will see you and there'll be trouble. What's the consequence if I'm not good, if there's not God? Well, there needs to be a legal consequence. So, you know, if I'm not tolerant, then the government's going to enact the punishment that I need.
Yeah. And this is exclusive humanism. We're not going to talk about it today, but this is then, because there's no higher authority beyond the human to enforce these values, these goods, you then get the third party. So we've got those of us who have belief and are acting for the human good, from transcendent belief, those who are acting from the exclusively human level. But then you've got the Nietzsche's who are, why should I?
Yeah. Why is that a good? And I think this is the thing that's sitting with me around all of this, that if you look at the list of the goods of that, you know, start to be promoted in this era, and they're just goods in themselves. There's no sense of these are good because God said they're good or because God gave them to us. And they're not necessarily goods that we would disagree with either, because remember, it's this progression through history of like deism first, where Christian goods are held up as important, or the nice Christian goods, the ones that they see as important. So life, prosperity, peace, mutual benefit, these things are good, but they're good in themselves. There's no God standing behind them as good. So it opens itself up to a Nietzsche saying, why are those things good and the will to power not good? Why would we, you know, put tolerance as a higher good than my individual expression of myself or my ability to use my giftedness to look after myself and people that I love? Like, why are you ranking them like that? Who said? Yeah. And the best that we can come to is democracy. The tyranny of the majority, if you like. The majority of people want a world where they feel safe. And if we let will to power be a good above tolerance or whatever it is, then people won't feel safe. So we're going to go with tolerance.
Yes. And if you take America out of the equation, because that's its own special case over there, but I really know our Australian political system, I think the Australian democratic state is a great example of this kind of exclusive humanism, where it's really important that no one brings their religious stuff in, and we can figure out how to be good as a society just based on our understanding of goods. And you're talking about like ranking of values. So Hume quite explicitly does this in this era. He talks about the genuine virtues, you know, those that are good for everyone else and good for society, and what he calls the monkish virtues, the things that don't really advance, you know, your own fortunes. They're not really valuable to society. Things like celibacy, like what good's that doing? Or penance or humility or solitude. And it's this idea that the real Christian is at the heart of the secular society. And there's like almost a repulsion against the Orthodox Christianity that came with these higher kind of virtues, or these virtues that don't seem to fit into this model of society that's emerging with exclusive humanism. And I was thinking it would be interesting to just look at that, because for you and I, for anyone like really serious about Christianity, there's going to be times, and even at this time, they could see that there was starting to be a split between, like, for the proponents of exclusive humanism, they could see that Christianity didn't necessarily fit. But also for Christians, they were like, actually, I don't know if this fits with that project. I was thinking like just a really clear example for me is that you can spend your time however you want, right? And exclusive humanism would say spend that time in ways that are going to bring you your own enjoyment of this experience of life and ways that are going to contribute to society. And I think about the times that I'm sitting in prayer, and it's, got to be honest, not enjoyable. It's hard work, it's dry, nothing's happening. I wouldn't say it's a pleasurable experience on a human level. And like, I can understand that people would say, why are you sitting in the chapel for an hour or 2 hours a day when you could be out on the streets working and contributing to society? Like, it's not doing anything productive in the worldly sense. Why do we value that? And the weight of society would say that there is no value in that. And yet, with this lens of understanding that there's a transcendent, there's more than the here and now, there's invisible goods, for want of a better word.
I was thinking about that mythical story of like boiling a frog in water. And I was thinking in some ways, although you say, the church kind of pushed back a bit, but there was a sense in which, or there is a sense in which you could also watch a lot of people, good people, well-meaning people, people with faith, like moving with deism. And if you like, they're the frog and the water's getting hotter and hotter. And they're not noticing it because these are good values that the world is promoting, if you like. And it's even in our own lives, I think sometimes you can get caught up in all the goods. It's good to be productive. It's good to contribute to society. It's good to look after myself and my needs and not burn myself out and that kind of thing. All of these shape me and my thinking to a point where, I'm sitting in the chapel and it's dry like that. And it would be really easy to have not gone there in the first place because all these reasonings give me what feel like good, solid reasons. It's better to be serving the poor than sitting here doing nothing. And it's not because I don't have faith or want God in my life, but actually because I've just been shaped by the shifting trends and values in the culture around me, so that the values that form me or hold me are only this small collection that the Enlightenment decided was okay.
I think one of the things that if you stay in this realm of the exclusive humanism project of these values are important, you need to be contributing to society, all of these things, and we know that you can live Christianity within that. If you don't move beyond that, you can't really get to God, in a sense, because God is beyond that. And we know that writers like John of the Cross would give us that there's a path to the heart of God, to that real intimacy with God that strip us of everything that the world would say we need.
And I think there's something, though, that makes it extra hard for us today to even understand what someone like John of the Cross would be talking about, because we're so shaped in a very small set of values or virtues, if you like. It's that shorn, it's the toothless dragon that I keep imagining, that there's something about belief today that needs to kind of push beyond, as you say, in all directions, really, to find scope to flourish, really. I feel like what otherwise happens is that, especially as layers have been added on in society of reaction against exclusive humanism in different directions, there's more and more different values that shape you more and more into a very small, like it feels like it being pushed into a small claustrophobic space that says, these are the things that are important. And I feel like to really have space to breathe as a Christian, you need to be able to push out beyond that.
Yeah, I think there's a flatness to what you're calling that little claustrophobic space. I think some people would find that quite safe, that all that's required of me is tolerance, contribution to the good. It's actually, I can understand it. One of the issues that the Enlightenment had with Orthodox Christianity is the mystery. And I think as Christians, part of the missionary project is to lean into the mystery, not try and figure it all out, because it's actually not all meant to be figured out. And, there's that famous story of Aquinas, who was actually quite a great rational mind, did a lot of figuring stuff out, and then he hit this moment of pure mystery and realized, he just surrendered into the mystery. And I think that that's one of the calls for us, is to not deny our sense of reason, but also to know the point where we surrender into mystery. And also in our last episode, we were talking about heroic good. I think there's, heroic humility, that no one's going to cheer you on the back for that. No one's going to go, oh, what a great thing that you did. But it's the stuff that no one's ever going to know about. That's the real heroic stuff, the stuff that's really going to form you, grow you in intimacy with the Lord. And you're not going to necessarily see all the fruits of this stuff now. I think that's one of the things. But we believe in the transcendent. We believe that there's a reason and purpose for heroic good that the world can't give an account of.
And a bigger picture, I think. I think one analogy of or a microcosm example maybe of this would be Christmas. It's like the secular world is happy to keep Christmas like we've kept a whole lot of other goods because, it's got all sorts of good values attached to it. It brings families together. It promotes peace and joy and happiness. We give each other gifts. It's good for us to take a rest and a holiday. All of this stuff is good.
Yeah.
But they want it shorn of God. Or God in a nice little box over there that you go to church and that's part of your celebrating. But let's not have any real dragon with teeth in this experience of church. Let's just go and look at the crib, and isn't the baby Jesus very nice? And let's all go home and have dinner together.
There's a definite decline of Advent, I would say.
Well, yes. But if you really think about what Christmas is about, as Christianity, we can be sold short if we think it's all just about baby Jesus. Baby Jesus is a nice scene that we can show a picture of to a child and everybody feels special and happy. But when we actually stop and think about the mystery of God becoming one of us, the hugeness of that, and then Advent pulls into that there's not just a first coming of God becoming one of us, but God's coming back. What do we need to do to prepare? Is our life pointing towards a God who is coming to us? Is our life pointing to the transcendent beyond that closed door of death? There's a whole world out there that's bigger than peace and joy and holidays and food and presents and nice little traditions that we have together that make us feel good. Christmas is awe-inspiring. It's not just a pretty picture, it's a beautiful world. Like there's something in me again, like let's break out of the confiningness, the littleness, the smallness that the Enlightenment has sort of pushed us into.
Mm. And maybe jumping onto your analogy, maybe it requires jumping out of the boiling pot and just being little frogs, kind of exploring, what do I actually want to be taking on and what's the pressures around me, and is there something I'm called to that's bigger than what the world would offer me?
And what of the goods that the world offer are worth, understanding and retaining? Like, it is good to live the Christian life in the midst of the ordinary. That's actually what Christmas is celebrating. God became an ordinary human being like us. But let's not lose the mystery of that. God became an ordinary human being like us. And why did he do it? So that we could become God. We could transcend the ordinariness of our humanity.
Maybe that's a good place to leave us for today, of just leaning into the mystery, whatever the mystery is that you're called to lean into today. Just, spend some time with that and allow yourself to consider the bigness beyond what the world would offer you.
Amen.
This has been Contemplating Culture, a podcast produced by the missionaries of God's Love Sisters. For more information from today's episode, be sure to check out the show notes. We pray that today has blessed you, and most importantly, we invite you to continue the conversation.